In today's episode.
Fraud prevention specialists are really good at figuring out how to commit fraud. I've actually been in the fraud prevention industry for 29 years. People who just thought they could get away with it. The fraudsters are successful. It has been a challenge every day of my life since I started doing fraud prevention. MRC is a global nonprofit membership organization for payment and fraud professionals. We had a historic lunch. So what's really awesome is the MRC is a community, and so really our organization is run by our members. I've been a victim of fraud so many times, and I always encourage people, be open and honest and collaborative, because in fraud prevention, the more you share, the better you get. A little secret, I actually think it's going to get really bad. One of the coolest places to be.
Hi everyone, welcome to the new episode of the podcast A Journey into Fraud Prevention. I'm your host Ivan, and this episode I'm joined by Julie Fergerson, CEO at MRC. Let's begin. Поехали. Julie, thank you for joining us today. Usually I start my podcast with simple question, but after a lot of MRCs in the past months, I don't believe it's going to be simple one. Fraud prevention. What is fraud prevention for you?
So fraud prevention, really, there's no single silver bullet. And so fraud prevention is a layer of tools that every merchant or financial institution must have, but it's also collaboration among each other and sharing what's going on and the latest attack. Because whatever we solve, you can guarantee the fraudsters will figure out a new scheme. And they actually have the deep web, the dark web, where they're sharing lots of tips and techniques. And so in the financial services industry, we have to have that same level of collaboration. So it is a combination of tools, but also of collaborating and sharing best practices and tips and techniques.
I believe we also have fraud creation from another side of the table. Since we are fraud prevention, someone's supposed to be fraud creation there.
Absolutely. And you know, sometimes we even do some think tanks of let's think like a fraudster, what's next? And those are always fascinating in conversations because fraud prevention specialists are really good at figuring out how to commit fraud.
Yeah, for sure. And every time when you try to buy something as a fraud prevention specialist, you're not only like checking sites and everything, but you also think, can I get some discount here? What I can use to find some discount code here? I don't know, I speak about myself. When I try to buy something, I always looking for promotion codes. Maybe I'm alone in this area. Maybe I'm not.
Yeah, you are not alone. I do the same thing. Some of the merchants would actually consider that coupon fraud or loyalty fraud using other people's coupons. But that is definitely, if you're thrifty and mind your money, that is definitely a common trend among all consumers.
How long have you been in the fraud prevention industry?
So I've actually been in the fraud prevention industry for 29 years. And I actually started in the e-commerce space 29 years ago. And the way I actually got into it is I built a payment gateway for shareware developers. So people who wrote their own software used to have to mail in checks, and the internet was starting to emerge. And it's like, ooh, this might be a better way to buy those software applications for our computers. We put up the first website, and within one day of selling online, the very next day we started seeing fraud come in. And that's really, it was fascinating to me. And I always say fraud prevention and payments are like breathing in and breathing out. You don't have one without the other.
I believe it's changed a lot. Could you drive us to the pain points or not pain points, some milestones that happens of change of fraud prevention? How you saw them during these years?
So early on, fraud was committed by mostly people who just thought they could get away with it. And then probably about 20 years ago, it really pivoted from the individuals committing fraud just for personal financial gain to more organized crime. And that's when we started to see different countries pop up with fraud farms where people would actually commit organized fraud against different merchants or different industries. And then over the years, we've seen more sophisticated technologies and tools being used to commit the fraud. And now, actually, at this moment in time with generative AI, it is faster and more aggressive and far more scalable for the fraudsters to commit the crime. And so the speed at which fraud is happening just seems to be increasing, and the sophistication seems to be increasing. And that's been a growing theme for quite a while. But with generative AI and a lot of the deepfake technology, it is now becoming very difficult to detect, as well as the speed at which new attacks are happening is increasing.
And what, based on your opinion, like most speed up the fraud? I have three milestones in my mind. So first one, AI. It's nowadays. Before is COVID, or even before it is start to raise of mobile payments. Which one of them do you believe they created a lot of the problems for fraud prevention industry?
I think probably what's created the biggest challenge is just that you're anonymous on the internet. So I guess when the lockdown happened, there was a lot more people sitting at home with free time. And so that probably created a few more fraudsters and a few more business plans for fraudsters than there was before. So it's kind of a difficult question to answer that you asked. And I'll say the challenge is the fraudsters are successful. And so that is the incentive. And so there isn't any one thing really accelerating it other than when they commit the fraud, it works. And that's a great reward because it's cold hard cash or products in the fraudsters' hands. And that's really the biggest thing that has changed. So COVID definitely had an impact that made things accelerate because more stuff moved to mobile. The generative AI has accelerated it, but the fact that it actually works is what continues to get the fraudsters going.
And you mentioned that you came to the industry from the e-commerce platform, but how you actually decide to move actually to fraud prevention and not continue to like your e-commerce payment career?
So I've always done both my entire career. Payments have been just as important as fraud. I think fraud is a more complex and ever-changing problem, although some might argue that payments has become that way in the last couple of years as well with all of the new emerging payment types. But fraud has always been fascinating to me because it is constantly something new and exciting that you have to figure out a puzzle and you have to learn, and that's what really motivates me.
That was my second question. What's motivated you to stay for this long period of time as an industry? And I got the answer even before I asked a question.
Yeah, it's a challenge. It is always a challenge. It has been a challenge every day of my life since I started doing fraud prevention.
I believe it's time for my one of my most exciting questions that I prepare. It is about MRC. Can you describe what is MRC?
Sure. So MRC is a global nonprofit membership organization for payment and fraud professionals. And I actually started it over 23 years ago with a group of amazing merchants. So I'm one of the co-founders, and we were all volunteers. And the way it started is we had a couple of merchants that also happened to be customers of my company that I was at the time. And they all had the common problems of the fraud attacks. And there was no way for them to share and collaborate information. And so we had a historic lunch where they sat down and started sharing information. And then on a regular basis, we had merchants get together. And it actually made a material difference. When we started the MRC, fraud rates were 2 to 3% of a merchant's e-commerce revenue or transactions. And it was just growing exponentially. And so by creating this organization, we were able to keep fraud in check. We were able to work together. We were able to reduce the fraud that was happening. Solution providers popped up, learned what merchants were doing, built some automated tools, and really the entire industry was born. And about 3.5, 4 years ago, when I was at my last company, we got acquired by MasterCard. And so I decided that I really wanted to go and give back to the community. And so I actually got the opportunity to come back and take the helm of the MRC and take it to the next level, which is really going from an events-based organization where people got together to do truly year-round engagement and collaboration. So we have Slack channels now where people are communicating on a daily basis of what's going on. We have community calls, and that is the way I stay most up to date on what's going on in the fraud industry. Is every 6 weeks we have a fraud community call where people are sharing information, and it's just so absolutely exciting to be engaged at that level and really be at the bleeding edge of fraud prevention.
I remember I first time hear about MRC about, 7 years ago, and it was, I may be wrong, it was maybe 2 or 3 conferences during the year, and now it is a lot. I know I started counting webinars before this podcast. I stopped counting after 15, and for MRC during the year, I know it's a lot of them, 20, maybe something around, that's one. And my question is, how you keep everyone who participate on these events like engaged? Because I attend Athens and so happy that I did this one. It was amazing experience. Started from organizing moment and also from the moment of the agenda. I'm so excited to participate on all meetings. Unfortunately, I only one. If I have my duplicates, I would attend also payment side. But how you keep all these like up to dates and keep agenda clear?
So what's really awesome is the MRC is a community. And so really our organization is run by our members. So, as a nonprofit organization, the MRC staff, we're here to execute and help our members collaborate and share. And we have an education committee that's made of a group of volunteers that works on our online training. We have a content committee for each of the different regions, and that's the groups that the members actually set the content for the regions. And so like our conferences, they might make recommendations for webinars. So we have one, in the US, one for Europe, one for the Asia Pacific region, and one for the LATAM region. So we just have a lot of different committees that our members volunteer, and that's what makes the MRC magic happen, is everybody's kind of chipping in because we have a common enemy, that fraudster.
But if someone who is not in MRC right now asks you why I need to join MRC immediately, what's going to be your response?
To be as organized as the fraudster, right? It's one of the things the fraudsters learned early on is if I learn a fraud scam and I share it with all my friends, it's very hard to catch me. And the speed at which that information happens among the fraud community is almost instantaneously. And from the merchant side, we need to be sharing our learnings that quick as well. And if a merchant doesn't, they'll have most likely a bad fraud spike that will cost them, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars. And what's really interesting to me over the years is sometimes merchants will leave our organization, but we always laugh because pretty much everybody comes back. So, budgets might get tighter and a merchant may not be able to afford the membership, but then a fraud attack happens and then all of a sudden fraud becomes front and center and MRC becomes super important again. So, hopefully by having all of the content you mentioned, we have, a couple webinars every week. We have virtual summits once a quarter. We have conferences all over the place. We have over 20 in-person events a year across the globe. So it's a lot of activity that's happening. So hopefully through that, a merchant can stay plugged in and understand what's going on. But it's really to stay ahead of the fraudsters. That's why you join the MRC.
You convinced me, at least me, but I believe you convinced everyone. And for everyone who just listen, these brilliant phrases about why you need to join MRC, I'm gonna leave a link to the website on the subscription. Please, everyone who interesting and still not in, going right away to there and sign in. It's a very amazing place to learn and share information, because this is what it is about. Have you ever been a victim of fraud?
I've been a victim of fraud so many times. What I always tell people is it's not whether you're smart or, you know all the scams, because I've been involved on the consumer protection as well as the merchant protection for a long, long time. But all it takes is one moment when you're a little sleepy or half distracted by the kids and you click on that link because you want to buy that cool new shirt or that cool new toy. and you type in all your information, and then you realize after you press send, oh, that was probably fraud. Additionally, anytime there's a new technology that comes out, I like to go experiment with it. And so it is not uncommon for me to get my credit card compromised as I'm playing with a new technology or platform. So unfortunately, I have been a victim of fraud several times. What I will say is there's lots of different resources to help consumers recover when you do become a victim of fraud. And I have a lot of different tools in place. I have fraud alerts set on my credit files, and every time a credit card transaction goes through on my credit card, it texts me to let me know what's going on. I have my bank accounts locked down pretty tight. So those are the things that I'll say, but there's no way to prevent yourself from being a victim of fraud. There's just too many. It's constantly hitting at you as a consumer. And no matter how vigilant you are, all it takes is one sleepy, tired moment or distracted moment to become that victim.
So I believe you're one of this kind of person who every month download all your settlements and report from your bank account and check each individual transaction to make sure that nothing happens for the past months that you cannot recognize.
Yeah, I actually do it at least once a week. But yeah, I definitely keep a close eye, yes.
My question is, what do you believe is important to people who right now on the core senior positions in the fraud industry to become manager or even higher position? Maybe you can give some advices for people who listen to this podcast.
Yeah, so when I'm coaching people, and MRC has a mentor-mentee program that's free to all our members as well, so we can pair you up if it's something you want to learn more about. But, one of the things that I always encourage people is to reach out to people who are in similar companies as you. Walmart and Target might be good friends to share information. Or two online betting companies or online dating companies. If you find somebody similar that's your peer, and collaborate and share information. Our natural tendency is this is our company secrets, and if I don't tell everybody, even within my own organization, what's going on, then I'll be more valuable. And I always encourage people, be open and honest and collaborative, because in fraud prevention, the more you share, the better you get. And that really helps some of the analysts transition from being that analyst to that manager or that team lead, right? So if you can become that coach and share the techniques. The other thing that I always recommend to people is to trust your spidey sense. So if you think that something is suspicious or it doesn't look right, but you can't figure out why, be insanely curious and drill into it and figure out why. Because the our human brain is the best detection for fraud prevention, and some of the craziest fraud scams that have slipped through all the different technology has just been caught by a person. And so always being vigilant and always thinking and trusting your spidey sense really helps you advance your career. And if you can teach your coworkers that as well, that lifts the whole organization up.
One more follow-up questions about career progression. So, for example, I am senior analyst for the past 5 years, and I'm not see myself as a manager, but as everyone know in the industry, it's not only about fraud prevention, it's globally happens. If you're an individual contributor, I see, in that cases, you might not grow even higher. Some positions open lead, etc., but if we're looking on options to grow, so only best options it is become a manager. What do you suggest this kind of people to stay IC, or if they don't like it, still jump it to be a manager and upskill themselves?
So luckily in the fraud space, you can be an individual contributor and climb all the way up the corporate ladder, because one of the great things about a fraud prevention expert is you need to work with the legal teams, the privacy teams, and the marketing teams. So if you can move into more of a role of a subject matter expert within your organization, I've seen people move into director and even vice president roles and still continue to be that individual contributor. You don't have to be a people manager to be a leader in an organization and make a material impact. And so, one of the things that I would encourage you to do is maybe reach out to the marketing team and say, hey, I'd like to be at some of those meetings where you guys are inventing some new cool promotions, and just provide some advice on the fraud aspects. Because as fraud managers, everyone knows marketing creates amazing opportunities for the customers, but also amazing opportunities for the fraudsters with some of the promotions. And so having a seat at that table and starting to collaborate across the organization can make you a really important asset to the company and grow your career, but still stay in that place of individual contributor. Because a little secret, I actually prefer to be an individual contributor versus a leader. And so throughout my entire career, you'll see me flip-flopping back and forth through it. Right now I'm in a leadership role, and it's a lot of fun. But at the end of the day, I'm a product person, and I love that product stuff. And so individual contributor role is a lot of fun.
Can't be agree more with you. You're 29 years in the industry. For example, you're tired of this industry, from the fraud and payments, from both of them. Where are you going? Do you have any amazing plan to start to, I don't know, do some kind of exciting stuff, or sell boards for surfing somewhere?
Well, it's interesting. So two things. In the middle of my career, I actually got a little bit tired of the pace of fraud prevention and payments. And so I decided to go do consumer protections. And I did that for 4 years. And what I learned is educating consumers is way, way harder than building fraud rules. So I came running back to the fraud prevention space on the merchant side. For me, long term, what's my next move? So I'm getting up there in years, and so I'm actually got my eyes on retirement, and I don't imagine that I'll ever exit our industry, because I'm just, at this point, fraud prevention and payments is a hobby as much as it is a job. But being more of that coach and that mentor and thought leader is probably my future as it relates to it. But I will honestly say I never tire of understanding the fraud aspects and what's going on in the industry. And it's actually only getting more exciting as the generative AI and the deepfakes technology really starts to take hold in the fraudsters community.
So I believe one of the options to using AI, in your case, just create kind of AI version of yourself to resolve all the issues, and you're just like sitting somewhere in the background with the coffee and enjoy the moment.
I don't think it'll ever get that good, but it'd be sure be fascinating if it did. And hopefully it's more than just me. It's the collective brain of the entire industry. So, I do think it's interesting. I use ChatGPT almost every single day at this point because it does, even just for write-ups that I might be doing, streamlining it, making more sense of it, researching information. It's really powerful. So I do think there's maybe a role. So hopefully I won't be replaced by it, but we may be.
About AI, because we speak a lot about it for the past 20 minutes. Do you believe it's gonna stay with us for a long time, or it just like spike that happens and maybe a year from now we stop to hear everything about AI because it's not gonna be so exciting anymore, or it's only early stage of AI that we see and it's going to be like progress significant higher that we expected, and we see a lot of more and more cases that involve this new functionality?
So I actually think it's going to get really bad, unfortunately, and it's here to stay. I was talking to somebody the other day, and in my career, there was a time when there was no data breaches of credit card numbers or personal information. And I remember when they started happening, and I started talking to the press and speaking about it at conferences, and everybody told me, oh, don't worry, it'll go away. Oh, it's not as big a problem as you think it is. And it actually became one of the largest problems in our industry. I feel the exact same way at this moment about AI, that in the future, it's going to be one of the largest problems in our industry in the future.
And I always try to say people who just afraid that they're gonna the positions, specifically like in the fraud prevention area, that right now it's a great opportunity to upskill yourself and start to using new functionality to prevent something, rather than just like sitting somewhere and afraid that it's going to be replace you. I may be wrong, but this is my position. What do you think about it?
I think your position is exactly right. This is just one more new technology that we as professionals need to learn how to use.
I definitely using this one on daily basis as well, and specifically I become so lazy in some areas, specifically in areas like when you write a code or some request, ChatGPT speed it up. I like it.
Yeah, but the question, you're not sitting around going, ooh, somebody did my work for me, so now I can go off and relax on the beach, right? You're going, ooh, now I can do other cool stuff, right? So it's just accelerating how much we're able to accomplish.
I don't know, it's good or bad things. I still have mixed feeling about it. Once I figure out for myself, I definitely let you know. For now, I have more pros and cons about it. And I hear a lot that the main advice to stay curious if you decide to join the fraud fighters path. Do you have any other advices to the people who right now are looking for change their career, or maybe start their first job, and fraud fighters in their focus?
Yeah, so what I'll tell you is hands down, being in the fraud prevention space is absolutely one of the coolest places to be. It's constantly changing, it's constantly learning. Because the criminals are using the latest and greatest technology, we as the fraud prevention team have to also be using the latest and greatest technologies. So you get to work on really cool new things constantly. Additionally, when a recession happens or a bad economy, where we might be seeing massive layoffs in other industries, you might see a little bit of tightening of the belt, but fraud actually always increases in a bad economy and actually ends up creating more jobs, not less. And so I would never say any career is recession proof, but I've been through a couple of recessions now, and fraud prevention career is pretty recession proof. So that's a great, another benefit of being in this industry. And anybody who wants to be in this industry, you hit the nail on the head, be insanely curious. And I would say, don't be afraid to say, I don't understand this. I don't have any idea what you're talking about. Please explain it to me. And I will tell you on a regular basis, I say, I don't understand. Please help me understand. Even today, even though I've been in this industry for 29 years, because there's so much to learn and that there's so much information to understand to really win against fraud, that's just one of the things that really makes this career in this industry very exciting.
Thank you for great advices. I believe I don't have any other questions. Thank you so much for joining me today. It was a really great story. I really enjoy it. And the same as the previous podcast, I'm really learn something every day. And thank you so much for joining me today. It is a pleasure to have interviews you.
Thank you, Ivan. It was a pleasure to be here, and it was really great to meet you. And if there's ever anything that I can do for you, don't hesitate to reach out and ask.
Thank you. And I'm calling my favorite words at the end of each podcast. Cut.